And now for some fun you can have using arpeggios. So arpeggios are little snippets of MIDI data that the Moxf uses, and it uses it to create the beats and bass lines, etc. in the performances that you hear. You can also load in collections of new arpeggios, so let's go ahead and try that. So go to File, you want to be on F3, which is Load, and make sure the type is set to All Arpeggio. And I'll be using the arpeggio collection Rock Solid Strums from Keyfax. Okay, and when you've located your file, hit SF1 to execute it. Okay, so let's look at these in voice mode first. Go to Voice, and since these are guitar strums, I'm going to pull up an appropriate voice for those. So I'll use the category search button and scroll through to find the guitars. Okay, hit enter. Let's go with a steel string. Okay, so now that I have my voice loaded in here, I can go to F5, which is Arp Edit. And this is where you're going to direct the keyboard to the new arpeggios that you've loaded in. So on Bank, you want to select User instead of Preset. And this is under F2, which is the Type tab. And if you look on F3, which is Main, you get a bunch of different options. Tempo, for instance. Switch you want to set to On, otherwise you won't be able to hear your arpeggio. And hold is kind of neat. If you want to set that on, you just need press a key and the arpeggio will play until you press another. So for now I'm going to leave that off. And I'll go ahead and set the timing to real time because I want the arpeggio to play when I play a key. Okay. Let's go back out to Voice. Make sure your physical arpeggio button is on. And let's see what we've got. First I'm just going to use one finger and you'll hear that this is kind of the voicing of this arpeggio, and it will play, basically it'll play chords, but you can also alter that by adding notes to your little performance here. And of course I can play this strumming pattern on whatever key I choose. Once we've loaded an arpeggio collection in, you need not reload it. It stays, it remains until it's overwritten. So you don't have to load it again if you want to change between modes. So let's take a look at some arpeggios in performance mode. And here I've called up a performance that I like. Let's just take a listen to it before we mess with the arpeggios. Okay, so that's pretty neat, but I think I want that synth voice to play the arpeggios that I've loaded. So let's go into F5, which is Arp Edit. So under F2, which is Type, you should select the user bank, so it'll pull from your arpeggios and not the default ones. And then under F3, which is Main, make sure your switch is set to On. You can change the hold, you can change the timing that the arpeggio comes in at. You can also change the octave. There's a lot of different things you can play with here. Okay, so let's go back out to Performance. And we need to select what voice the arpeggio is going to have. So hit F2, which is Voice. And using your arrow keys, you can select the voice that the arpeggio will play. I think I would like to have these strums on part 4 or voice 4. And in each arpeggio, or excuse me, in each performance, there are 4 voices that you can change. So once we've got our voice selected, let's go back to performance, make sure your physical arpeggio button is on, and let's see how this sounds. Arpeggios are just raw information and raw data that you can change the voice of, you can use in performance mode, but another cool thing you can do is record them into pattern mode, and I'll show you how to do this. So I've started to set up a pattern here, and I'd like to use some of those strumming arpeggios on the first track. First, let's choose a voice. I'm on track 1 here. I'll go into mixing, and then I'll use my category search feature to find an appropriate voice. Scroll to a guitar, hit enter. Okay, let's go with this one. Back out to pattern. Okay, and over here you can use the arpeggio edit button and make sure you're in F2, which is type, and select user for the bank. And then you want to go into F3, which is main, and set your switch to on. Let's go back to type and see if we can hear some of these. Okay, so this is a nice way you can audition these. Let's go back out to pattern and go into record with your record button here. And since we've already changed the arpeggio settings with our physical edit button, we don't need to use the F3, which is ARP Edit, but if you wanted to, you could go ahead and do that here and switch between these 2 tabs that we've seen before. So I think I'm going to choose this strumming pattern. Okay, let's go back out to record. I'm going to leave loop off because I want it to grab the right amount of bars and beats, and we can have quantize on for now, that's fine. So let's go ahead and try something out. Okay, let's have a listen. Okay, so that sounds nice, but let's say we wanted to add something else to it. Once we've recorded our strumming arpeggios into this pattern, we can load in another arpeggio collection and it'll still stay in our pattern. So I think I'm going to add some percussion. Let's go to File, make sure you're on F3, which is load, and the type is select to arpeggio again. Let's back out till we find our file. I think I'm going to go with this one. Hit SF1 to execute, and it'll overwrite those guitar strums. But that's okay, because we've recorded it into our pattern. All right, let's go back to the pattern. And I want to be on track 5 here. Okay. And let's go into mixing. Choose an appropriate voice for these using the category search. And since these are percussion, I'm going to go ahead and choose a drum voice. Okay, let's audition a few of these, and you can do that by hitting the edit button over here under arpeggio. Okay, and on the F2 tab, which is type, go ahead and navigate up to the user bank. And in F3, which is main, you want to make sure your switch is on. Let's go back to F2 and go through some of these. So you can also see that the name changes up here, so you can actually know which arpeggio you're listening to. Okay, so I think I like the first one. Okay, let's go back out to pattern. Let's go into record. And I'll hit F3 to go into Arp Edit just to make sure I've got everything set the way I want it to. I think I'm going to change the timing so that it's in real time. That looks good. So let's go back out to record. Make sure loop is off if you want it to. And this time I'm going to set the quantize to off so it retains all of the original feel of the drum. So let's go ahead and record something. Okay, let's hear what we recorded. Okay, so that sounds pretty neat. The neat thing about arpeggios is that they are simply MIDI data, so you are free to change the voice and alter the tempo to your heart's content, which makes them infinitely flexible. So let's say I wanted to change the voice of that guitar. I'll go into mixing. I'm going to use my category search feature. Let's choose something a bit different. Okay, let's hear what that would sound like. Alright, so that's different. Let's try changing the tempo. So as you can see, these arpeggios are infinitely flexible, and that is the awesome thing about MIDI. So that's it. Now hopefully you have some tools to start creating your music with a little less of a headache.